This is RPD Officer Leon Kennedy, and you're listening to the Let's Talk Resident Evil podcast.
What is up, everybody? Anthony here, and welcome back to another episode of the Let's Talk Resident Evil podcast. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about everything that I've been up to, kicking off this first quarter of the year. And we do have some other topics to get into, some games I've been playing, survival horror related, and stuff you, the viewers, have voted on and kind of gauged what is going to be next with the channel, and all the stuff that has been kind of going on with rumors of Resident Evil 9. So let's get into it. This year kicked off with, more of a live stream approach as far as, what live stream series can I kind of fill in the time with, because also with the lack of official Resident Evil announcements, there's time to play other survival horror games, go back and play other Resident Evil games in a different way. And the ways that I've been kind of doing that is through the Dice Lock and, of course, the Master Series. The first thing that I had was the 100% series, which I kind of started with Resident Evil 2 Remake, where I 100% it, get all the trophies or the achievements, whatever I decide to do on that particular game. And for the beginning of this year, it was Resident Evil Remake, which is my favorite remake of all time. And I did start off that 100% series. Very fun. Loved playing that game, man. That is just an amazing remake. I love playing that. And it's not really a challenging 100%. I mean, I've done it on the PlayStation version, so I was doing it on the Xbox One, and I got 100% on that. And then I went to the Xbox 360 version, which is a separate version, another 1000G. And I went for that. So it was kind of like a double remake marathon that I kind of did. And I think it's time to kind of put that on the shelf for a little bit until I circle back around to it in the Master Series. But I was doing the 100% runs, and then in between there was the Resident Evil 2 Remake Dice Lock. The long-awaited comeback of the Dice Lock finally dropped with Resident Evil 2 Remake, and I failed 3 attempts at the kickoff of this year. My practice with Resident Evil 2 Remake was up there, but man, I kept failing at the sewers. I could not get the spark plug. I kept dying on the way there in the water. If you guys watched it, you know what happened, but you can guess it. The stipulations basically got screwed, and shit happens, okay? It's a dice lock. It's luck of the draw. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what stipulation will be picked. So, maybe next time I'll get lucky. Not sure. I keep playing the attempts on hardcore, and maybe I shouldn't, but at the same time, I'm really trying to go for that extra challenge. If I dropped it to standard, yes, it probably would be 10 times easier. I probably would have finished it on my first or second attempt, even with crappy stipulations. I would just have more health, more ammo. But yeah, Resident Evil 2 Remake definitely kicked my ass, and I plan on bringing that back in a little while here, so we can actually get back to some other dice locks once I beat RE2 Remake. Maybe an RE3 Remake dice lock? Perhaps. Got to get over 2 first, but we'll see what happens. It's been fun, though. I've been enjoying going back and getting better at Resident Evil 2 Remake specifically, because for a while I didn't play it as much as I would have liked, and within doing this 100% LTRE series, where we just 100% of Resident Evil title, even if it's multiple times, it's going to be very interesting going into what I want to do next with this series, which is, I kind of hinted about it in the remake streams, Resident Evil 0 is going to be the next 100% attempt. Yes, you heard it officially here first. Resident Evil 0, I will be taking on for the 100% series, where I have to complete it, get all the trophies or achievements, whatever version of the game I choose. And it's probably going to be a doozy, because as you may or may not know, I am not very fond of Resident Evil 0. I like the story. I like the characters. I don't even mind, some elements of the game as they are, but I can't get over the item management and just the challenge that some of those trophies/achievements have, including the Leech Hunter, which I am not looking forward to. So it's going to be interesting. So I think I'm going to make a video series just about doing this for Zero, because now I would have done it for Remake here, but I mean, I already did it a million times, and it's not like Remake isn't a challenge getting 100%, but, I've done it before. I've done it twice before, and, here I am doing it 2 more times. So Remake, it wasn't too bad. Zero, I feel like making a video, because there's going to be that uphill battle, there's going to be that challenge. So it would be a fun kind of evergreen type video to just always have on the channel of me trying to attempt these damn achievements or trophies for RE0. And that brings us around to the Master Series, which is a brand new live stream series that I talked about and did the first official stream, which was on Jill Valentine, Resident Evil 1 OG, knife only. Very simple stipulation, but I promise they will get harder as the games go on. Resident Evil 2, Claire A, is up next. That's going to be handgun only, no herb mixtures. So I'm going to see how I can handle that game with just a handgun and not being able to mix herbs, just using single green herbs. And that's going to be interesting. I'm not terrible at Resident Evil 2, but I am better at RE3 than I am with RE2. But as the games get on further and further, I will have more stipulation options. These are all voted on by Patreon supporters and YouTube members. So, again, you supporters get a gauge on the content as far as how it gets altered and whatnot. So, the Master Series is something that will just be kind of going on this year, going back to the conversation about how there isn't really much going on in the world of Resident Evil. And even when there is a trailer to potentially drop maybe sometime in the summer or this year for the next Resident Evil game, that will be, the next kind of era that we start covering that trailer, making content on it when we actually have official stuff to talk about. So until then, there is time to fill in with other stuff, and the Master Series will be cool because it can just keep going on, even if the RE9 stuff drops and there's more stuff, this will just kind of keep going along with the other live stream series. So I've been really trying to get a lot of this stuff off the ground, really focusing on live streaming the beginning of this year. And I haven't lost focus on the videos or VODs, whatever you want to call them, also on the channel. I know I do need to improve on some of the approach on some of them, so I know kind of where to gauge the audience, what they like, what they don't like. This year has also been a test of, does YouTube like shorter videos? Does it like longer videos? Because, of course, the podcast is the staple of this channel, and these are always longer form podcasts that, people usually watch and tune into them. But then there's the other side of the coin where there's people that just like watching shorter 10 to 12 minute videos. But even back in the day, this podcast in particular was the first Resident Evil podcast on YouTube. There was podcasts online and stuff, but as far as the YouTube space, this was it. And it was weird back then when you posted podcast on YouTube because people were just getting over the if they had a director's account, could they upload a longer video than 10 or 15 minutes? There was that. And so once that kind of gate was lifted and there was podcasts on YouTube, it was kind of unorthodox back then because a lot of people know podcasts or radio shows or anything to be downloaded or to be on iTunes, to be on, another service. Podcasts on YouTube now is like, that's where people watch most of their podcasts now because they like to have a visual and they can also listen. They have an option. But back then it wasn't normal to do that. And where I'm getting at with this is that it's a longer form part of the channel. So the longer form videos can also be a thing that isn't just the podcast. It's just whether or not, YouTube decides to push those kind of things. Because I know that my audience and my dedicated fan base, whether you support me on Patreon or memberships or not, and just like and subscribe and listen and just take your time to watch my stuff, that all helps. So, I know that all of you regular viewers are going to watch what I put out. It's just a matter of trying to push past the ceiling, so to speak, that kind of gets surrounded by a lot of the saturation on YouTube as far as gaming channels, Resident Evil channels. It's a lot different, I always mention it, but it was different 14 years ago. There was, probably less than 10 dedicated RE channels that were just doing RE stuff, and it was very small. And I was fortunate enough to be around back then when it was just more of a simple kind of angle of just like, let's just upload Let's Plays and just do videos on Resident Evil, do reviews. And then that came into the whole live streaming era where now you have to balance this weird beast that is YouTube that's constantly changing its mind, constantly changing its platform and the foundation. And you have to pepper in live streaming with videos. And that's always been a balance. But when the algorithm decides to kind of take control and push what it wants, it's very weird to gauge. So all I can do is just be honest, be genuine with my content, stay in my lane that I like to stay in, which is Resident Evil survival horror. Like I mentioned, I have my film channel. I still want to do a third channel up and coming. That will just be everything else that I like, gaming wise. That will be something that's going to be explored really soon. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. I don't want to jinx myself. I don't want to talk about it. I don't have a name. I don't have, I just know that like my eyes are always going to be set on the future and what's upcoming, and what's obviously what I'm doing now is important too. But, I just have to kind of make sure I can stay prepared, especially if I want to do this, continue to do this at the capacity that I'm doing it at. And it's still very challenging. I mean, the beginning of this year has been challenging in many ways when it comes to YouTube and just like growth and trying to grow when there's not a lot of Resident Evil stuff happening compared to last year, when a lot of stuff was happening. So in the meantime, I have a lot of time to focus on the 100% series, the Dice Lock, the Master series, and it really does kind of focus, a lot on the Resident Evil titles again, but in a different way. Or I'm pushing myself to 100% in games, which is just something I actually like to do anyway. I always love doing, achievement hunts or trophy hunts. That's something I always like doing before even doing content and streaming online. So, making that approach with some Resident Evil titles, approaching Resident Evil games with different stipulations, it switches it up and makes it fun, and it's definitely, it distracts from the the dry periods of no content, no news from Capcom's end, as far as like any Resident Evil stuff that we are chomping at the bit to get, because let's face it, I mean, it just turned 28, the whole franchise, and it's the biggest it's ever been. So when there's something like RE4 Remake that just sold so well, and just smashed records again this past year, a lot of people are just waiting to see what's next, and until then, that's why I will be doing a lot of these different live streams and other games to play. And another survival horror game that I ended up playing, which was a new release, was Alone in the Dark last month. And let's talk about Alone in the Dark, because a lot of fans were interested in hearing my thoughts after playing it and kind of collecting, my thoughts on just the whole playthrough as a whole and how the community felt about it. At first it did have that mixed reception online. It still does. It doesn't really get a lot of good reviews in the reviewers or journalist type of environment. But as far as a survival horror fan, it did have, some bugs here and there. It did have some issues with glitches, but as a game, I actually enjoyed Alone in the Dark. I mean, it wasn't the best survival horror game I've, played in the last decade, but I think this game was a slower burn type of game. It wasn't a RE remake type where, let's say RE4 Remake, for example, it's very combat heavy. It's very, combat driven. Where this, it's a slower burn. It's about detective work. It's about reading the files, looking for clues, solving the puzzles, going through the house, backtracking, using the map. It obviously is, trying to channel what the original games had. The last Alone in the Dark full game that was released, like that was a full title, was 2008, which was more of like a modern updated. This takes it back, it gives it that, 1920s, 1930s aesthetic, and it really makes it to where it's a slow burn in, you do get payoff, but I think they really like to pace it where as you're kind of unraveling more about the house, more about the people that are there, the patients of the doctor, what's going on with the dark man, who's in the story. That's what the entity is called, right? So you're trying to find out more as you go along. And I think the way that it kind of feeds in that story is pretty good. And the acting is pretty good. There's some questionable delivery, but other than that, it's not like we are, not used to seeing some B movie acting in our survival horror, even though it is 2024. But I do think that the graphics were pretty good in the Unreal Engine. It did look good on the Series X that I was playing it on. A lot of the bugs that came out were on consoles as well as PC as far as getting stuck in walls. I had a delayed gunshot issue the whole time I played. So I would tap the button and then the character would shoot and then it would just be nothing and then it would happen. It's like if you're editing something and you're putting the time, you're putting that audio too late when the actual, gunshot goes off. So very weird. And I know, again, this is all fixed now. But at the same time, yeah, games aren't always released 100% nowadays. And it's a shame that that's the norm. Another thing with Alone in the Dark with the combat, where sometimes it does feel a little janky when there's multiple enemies attacking you on the screen. And the breakaway weapons, like the melee stuff, they literally are breakaway weapons. They feel like, you can get good 3 or 4 hits and then it just breaks no matter what it is. So I feel like they should have balanced out the melee weapons a little bit better. But at the same time, it's one of those games that also implements stealth in some way where you can't do stealth kills, but you can crouch. But every time, there's like a stealth section where you have to sneak past the enemies, they always find me. And you can't go up behind the enemies, to my knowledge, and just kill them. So that was another pointless little section of the game, or elements where it would be like, oh, you could sneak or you could throw an object to distract, the enemy so they can run. It's like they added that, but it didn't seem like it, mattered. It just, and there was no way to stealth kill, stealth takedown, so I don't know. That's another thing that I thought was kind of pointless. But other than that, I like the story. I like the characters. And I don't like to, put stuff in number ratings typically, as you know. But to just kind of give it a general sum up, I would say, 7 out of 10. It didn't blow me away. It had some flaws, but I actually did enjoy it. And I could see myself going back and playing it again. So Alone in the Dark was our one, kind of a big release in this first quarter of the year with a survival horror title. There might have been some other ones that are independent that I'm not mentioning here, but Alone in the Dark was delayed twice. It was supposed to come out in October, then it was supposed to come out in January, and here we are in March. Well, it's April now, but in March we finally got the game, and I will say this. It's, not looking good as far as how it sold and how the people online talked about the game or reviewed the game. And it does kind of suck that it's not going to get, maybe the legs for another sequel. It has the potential to, have more sequels, stand out there like a Resident Evil, where maybe, yeah, it's not as big as a Resident Evil nowadays, but it still could have maybe made a bigger impact at launch. But a lot of people will end up liking this game. I think this will probably have more of a cult following through the years if people decide to kind of forget about it and maybe not appreciate it if Alone in the Dark kind of creeps back into the dark, so to speak, where we don't see another game for another 15 years, which is kind of nuts if you really think about it, that it took this long for it to get a game that is also worth a damn. And not saying the 2008 game wasn't, but why didn't we get something that was good in between then, So a lot of people want to see me go back and play some of those other Alone in the Dark titles. And again, I'm always willing to do that because there are a bunch of, polls that I'm putting up every time I play another game that's survival horror related, and I always try to cycle in the games that are probably either A, most requested, or B, other ones that I just want to play. And speaking of that, Cold Fear was the next game that was voted on. And Cold Fear was, I think it was right next to Fatal Frame, where they're like the top two. Fatal Frame, 2 times now, was actually voted on, and it was a close call. But Cold Fear really won on Patreon and on YouTube members for the votes. So right after Alone in the Dark, I booted up Cold Fear, played it on the Xbox, and man, that was a fun survival horror game. That was something where I wasn't really expecting much going into it. I didn't know like what was going to happen because I've only, seen some things, I've heard some things about Cold Fear through the years, being online and, just reading about it. Never came across it back in the day, never came across it through like a GameStop or an EB Games or, the video store. Never saw Cold Fear. And then I started to hear about it. Many people have asked if I have played it, should I play it? And I was like, you know what? If it's winning, I mean, people are asking for it. So very brief game. I think I beat it in like 6 or 7 hours, give or take. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, not that I went in with low expectations, but I didn't know what to expect. It mixed the fixed camera angles with the over the shoulder. I liked Hansen as a character. That's who you play as. And I like the fact that, it's a very kind of not isolated game, but it only has like 2 major areas, and it shows the infection. It shows, the doctors that found the stuff, or the scientists that found the stuff, and they started to, experiment on soldiers and stuff. And you also have to fight live soldiers on top of infected soldiers. So there's that layer to it as well, which is really cool. And having to shoot the head off completely or they'll keep coming back. The different weapons you can get. The music was awesome. The graphics actually weren't too bad for the time. I mean, it was I guess if you want to call it a cheaper game that, didn't have like all the money in the world, but a lot of the games that we played back in the day didn't. And it was still fine. They still came out finished. They still came out complete for the most part. And yeah, I really enjoyed Cold Fear. It was a fun ride, to play through it for the first time, and to get used to everything by the end of it. I was like, oh man, like just as I was really getting used to everything, I was like, man, I'm already halfway done. And then the game just kind of ended. And I was like, oh man, like that, it would have been cool to play more. And, some games, even in that genre of survival horror, aren't always the longest, especially back then. Some of them just get in, get out, and it's a done deal. The game doesn't have a map system, which was very interesting. So you constantly had to run back and remember which doors you went through and stuff like that. I swear probably an hour of my playthrough in total was probably just me looking for, the door or where the exit is. But yeah, so not bad as far as a survival horror game from 2005 that got overshadowed by Resident Evil 4, which makes sense. But Cold Fear is a good example of them, taking elements of survival horror that we know and, borrowing stuff from other games, obviously, and making something really cool out of it, because I can still watch a lot of movies that do that, where it's like they take a bunch of elements and it's clearly, ripped from another thing, but they just make it its own thing and change some stuff, but it's still fun. It's still cool. And there's many games like that. And I think Cold Fear might have gotten more of a bad rap, but like after playing it, I'd like to play it again. Like it's a fun game that I would go back to. I'd even pick it up just to have it, just to own it. Cause I played it on my Xbox, but I have, a bunch of games on that thing. So, it worked out. But yeah, thank you guys for voting on that. And don't worry, the next poll will go out soon, probably by the end of this week, by the time you're seeing this podcast. So there will be some other voting on to do. and we'll see what other survival horror games that I will be able to, dive into maybe for the first time. I know Parasite Eve 2 is on the list for potentially being in there. Silent Hill 3 is another one that I have never fully finished. I did play the first couple hours of it, but I've never finished it. So there's a couple more I might add in there, and we'll see how the fans and the supporters react to it. Another thing that's in here is the Keeper's Diary. So Keeper's Diary is still being worked on, and hopefully there'll be some more updates soon. I don't have any official date or anything like that. I just know that everything's looking great with the edits that I've seen, the color grading. I know the effects are still being worked on, so that's why we didn't get a release last month. So we are the first quarter down, and I know it's not here yet, but don't worry, it will be here soon. I can assure you. Everybody has been busting their ass. Everyone who's been involved in getting this thing over the finish line. When you kind of see the process of filmmaking, and you know how filmmaking can be, especially when something is in the can, and there's kind of like a deadline. How much has to get done after the fact is definitely, a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. It's one of those things where, sometimes things, go wrong on set, or sometimes things go wrong while you're filming. And yes, that does happen with every production. But a lot of times you have to do a lot more extra work when it's done, because you just have to, there's just a lot of stuff you have to cover. And don't worry though, because, the trailer did come out this past month, and it's hopefully people see that trailer. Like I said, it's been like 98%, maybe 99% positive. I mean, there's been a few stupid comments, but that just happens with YouTube, As far as us posting it on social media, all of our respected channels, it seems like most people are excited about it. And really happy to see, all of the efforts that, people put into to donate and actually make it possible, because it's, for the fans, by the fans. That's, definitely something we've been saying all along. I know it's corny to say, but it's true. It's definitely a labor of love, and I'm really happy that everybody who saw the trailer can see that, the money went to something that is a project from the heart. And I'm really excited for this actual release date coming out, because just to see everything get pieced together was really an amazing thing, to see it all come together. And my role on this, as I talked about in the podcast back in the fall, was a camera assistant. So I was there slating all the shots, helping Nuji with the lens changes, and keeping everything, safe in that container with just these expensive lenses. And I was there for the whole shooting process. So, to see it from just those little bits of us filming back in October, and then now flash forward, now we're here at the top of April, and it's like, holy crap, where has the time gone? And also just how much work has been done immediately after those few, it wasn't 2 weeks of shooting, it was more like 9 days of shooting, so 8 or 9 days, but it's incredible. So, and that's what's magical about filmmaking and piecing everything together. It is an uphill battle for sure, as far as like, how much time and how much of your life you have to put into getting these films made and getting these things made. And this is why stuff never gets made, because it's very, very tough, very challenging, and random things can happen along the way. But we are staying positive, and we are very, very happy. I think I can say from the whole team collectively that we are really stoked that everyone else is stoked about the trailer. So definitely check out the Keeper's Diary trailer. That's something that also, dropped after the last time I last spoke with you on the podcast. So this will be, again, another good milestone for this year, is getting this out there, and kind of achieving something that we never thought could even happen, to be honest with you, at the capacity of us kind of being where we are in the world and all of us coming together and making this thing happen, it's definitely a special moment. I'm really excited that everybody who saw the trailer was, really positive towards it. And I think that showed people that, we weren't really messing around when it comes to trying to really bring an authentic fan film to everybody and hopefully put it in front of as many eyes as possible. And, if this does good and we let this thing kind of simmer a little bit, it's just going to open the door for more projects. And some of them might already be, brewing a little bit. Hint, hint. But we'll keep some of this stuff on the DL for now. We want to let Keeper's Diary come out and show itself off and be in this kind of, next little phase of us kind of getting together, making projects like this that are very special to our hearts and is important to a franchise that we dedicate so much time and love into. So, yeah, that's what's been going on with Keeper's Diary. Stay tuned for more updates on that. And last but not least, we have to talk about Resident Evil 9, which is kind of up in the air at this point. Everybody's been, wondering about the leaks and the rumors and the stuff that I usually don't talk about or make a bunch of videos on. Because, obviously a lot of the stuff that's been going around isn't really going back to anything that's, credible at all, despite what, the leak reports will say of, where the source came from and all this stuff. Very disappointing. But I think the one thing that needs to be focused on is not so much Resident Evil 9 being open world, which I don't think is going to be the case. I think that's a BS thing. And in the case that it was real, it wouldn't really do anything positive to the franchise. I mean, they have to focus on what is the problem with the story and the writing and where Village left off. And I have a lot of issues with that. And I've never been too shy to speak my mind on that. So I think certain franchises throwing open world in there just to make it different or to switch it up is just like lazy approach, even though it might seem grander in scale because, we're adding all this stuff. But it's not going to change the story and the writing and the use of characters or misuse of characters that they've been doing recently in their mainline titles. 7 and 8 specifically, more so Village because Village included Chris. 7 included Chris with the DLC, but he was almost like a different person, but I'll even count that too, where it just didn't seem like it gelled well. I do like 7 over 8, but there's still problems I have with 7. And a lot of those, collectively, those two games, the Winters, I just didn't really, it didn't do it for me. I thought Ethan was, a faceless character just because of VR on RE7, and they kept it that way. And there was no real connection. There wasn't actually, like by the time there was real cutscenes in Village, it was too late. Everything was always happening in the first person. But I think now, whether it's Jill, whether it's Chris, whoever they bring in here, if they continue this BSAA story, it also needs to not have this Romanian, like, vampire Lycan shit going on. Like, what is that? That's not Resident Evil. That doesn't have the vibe for Resident Evil. If you like it, to each their own, that's fine. You're allowed to like what you like. I'm not here to gatekeep. I'm not here to say you can't like certain eras of Resident Evil, certain live action films. You can like whatever the hell you like. But in my opinion, Village not only disrespected Chris, but completely just like shoehorned in the Miranda and Spencer connection through files and did not even fit the vibe at all. And Chris Redfield wouldn't have he wouldn't have waited to the end to tell Ethan about, Mia. You know what I mean? Like, there's just certain aspects that just don't make any sense at all. And, I'm not going to sit here and make this a Village hating thing, but I kind of have to in a way because I needed to segue right into how I want RE9's story to be. Like, RE Village was just very, like, it feels like the houses were just kind of, like, set up to be this bigger thing and just ended up not being as big as they were set out to be. You know, like Lady D obviously took over the marketing, but like her section and final boss was stupid. In terms of like her final boss, it was stupid. And her design was horrible, in my opinion. And it just ended. Like, you could finish that in such a quick time. You know, when I go back and play that thing, I don't know when, probably, you know, whenever I do the Xbox 100% achievement, because I got the platinum for that game on PlayStation. So if I ever do Xbox, I have to go back to that version. But man, like, I am just, no. And then, you know, Heisenberg, okay, like, I didn't care about Moreau as much. You know, like, Moreau was okay. And Beneviento was, you know, that was the whole thing where people were like, come on, Anthony, you're being too hard on the giant, you know, baby crawling through the thing. It didn't scare me. I wasn't like this, you know, these scare cameras on YouTube and Twitch that do this thing where they have to like, oh my God, I'm scared, help me. And you can tell it's like a fake reaction, you know, or if it's real, that's fine too. But like, I got crap from all angles when I didn't like Beneviento, when I didn't like all these houses. And it's like, take all that out, mute it for RE9. Just make it like a simple story. Bring back zombies. Bring back Jill. Bring back Chris. Let's figure out what's going on with the BSAA. Why are they corrupt? Why do they have BOWs? Let's figure this out. You can have new characters too. I'm not sitting here saying they can never have new characters for Resident Evil. I'm not against that. But I just think they have to honor these characters that we know as they get older. They're only getting older as this timeline keeps moving from mainline to mainline. So let's figure this out. Instead of just keeping them in the background, putting them in spinoffs or nothing at all. Like, this needs to be adjusted, I feel like, with the writing, just to figure out what direction they have to. You can't really put open world over this and keep it like, you know, this, whatever they're trying to do, the witches and the whatever the hell they're trying to, like, you know, rumor out this RE9. Even if that's, again, false information, which it probably is, you can't just throw open world at that and just fix it. Like, you just can't. There's so much that needs to be addressed. And that's my problem with that. I don't think that it needs open world or should have open world, because if they're going to do it, like, you know, you can make it as open as a Resident Evil 4 remake, for example, where you get a map, you can have a merchant, you can have your side stories, side quest stuff, have a treasure over there with the puzzle that you can get in the corner, you know, do the other puzzle that in the other room that gives you, you know, an extra attachment, like things like that. Yeah, they can keep that. That's not open world. It's just an open, you know, you have an open kind of map to explore, but it aligns you in this kind of, you know, linear path anyway. And there are sections where it completely cuts you off and you can't go back. There's always a section. Even with RE4, there's a point of no return, right? The merchant says, you know, make sure you do everything. We're not coming back here. You know, that's basically what he's saying. So they can have that too. I don't care if they add that for RE9. I'm all down for another Duke or another merchant type character. But man, they got to reel in that story and just figure it out. I just want to keep staying positive with the road ahead. Hopefully when the RE9 stuff begins, there will be, you know, something in that trailer that gives us enough to talk about where we can kind of, you know, pick it apart and say, okay, this is what they're doing. This is what it seems, you know, to be like the next direction. These are the enemies we're facing. Let's just hope that whenever that reveal is, whether it's at a Sony event, Capcom event, RE event, that it is, you know, it's looking good, like how we want it to look. And that's like a Resident Evil game. Where Village, again, had a lot of, you know, cool things that they were throwing in, but we were kind of just saying the whole time, it doesn't really, like, feel like Resident Evil. But, you know, the gunplay is good. The action is good. You know, it's a more ramped up version of RE7 with Village, you know. It aims great. It plays great. It runs great. The gameplay is fantastic. It's the story that is, you know, obviously we knew it was going to be a little more peppered in action, kind of like how RE4 and RE4 Remake ended up being. But at the same time, yeah, the writing was just kind of all over the map and kind of just lazy. just kind of lazy in my opinion. But I do think that there's going to be a lot of different theories online, different things that are going to be leaked again, quote unquote leaked. I'm doing this with my the air quotes if you guys are just listening and not watching, because the leaks don't really have much of a source anyway. And, I understand it's always going to be, brought up, and these topics are going to get brought up again when there is a lull in this franchise, when everybody is chomping at the bit for the next bit of RE information. Are we ever going to get a trilogy, remaster of the original games? A lot of people want that. I don't think that's happening anytime soon, even though I think it will print money. Maybe for the 30th anniversary, maybe. Will RE1 remake ever get remade? Or the remake? I think so. I think it's a matter of time. That could also be in the works too. Obviously there was, some April Fool's jokes that went around that wasn't legit, but I still wouldn't put it past them in terms of, being able to give us, the mansion over the shoulder in the Rex engine. You never know. I still want RE5 remake to happen. I know that that's also, an obvious one because it leads right off of RE4 and what we saw at the ending of that, and Separate Ways. I mean, it really did leave those breadcrumbs, like I've been saying, to RE5. And again, like I said, bring on RE5 remake. I'm down for all of that stuff. So I don't think the remakes are affecting the franchise, and I don't even think the main line are affecting the franchise because they sell so well to an audience that doesn't really care about some of the specifics that I care about. You know what I mean? Some people aren't really going to pick apart the lore and the files and, who is who. And, everyone knows Chris Redfield. Everyone knows Wesker. Everyone knows Leon. There's characters that everybody knows. And the whole argument of like, well, RE5 needs to be, or RE Code Veronica needs to happen so RE5 can happen. It's like, look, Code Veronica, it'll happen eventually. We never got a current remake of the first RE1 since 2002, back in the day, right? We have RE2 remake, RE3 remake, RE4 remake. Guess what? Guess who shows up? Wesker. You're telling me people that play that game don't know who Wesker is and are like, who is this guy? No. They know who Wesker is. They know who Chris is. These are iconic characters. People act like, even if you haven't heard of these games or played them, that just from playing a couple RE games, you wouldn't be able to pick out these characters. Like, I understand you want a cohesive story, and we could still get that. But don't tell me they can't do RE5 remake next because Code Veronica hasn't been made yet. That is a bunch of bullshit. Everybody, even if you only played RE4 back in the day, and that was the only RE game that you ever played, people that played RE4 remake knew who Wesker was. And Wesker was in the original Resident Evil 4, but only in the Mercenaries and then only in the cutscenes of the Separate Ways scenario. He was never actually in the main game, in the cutscenes. And then when we saw him there, and then we also got Separate Ways in the remake, they made everything more streamlined. They connected everything, and it can lead right into RE5. I don't think people are not going to know who Chris is because we didn't get a remake featuring Chris. Everybody knows who Chris Redfield is. And even if you don't, well, guess what? You're still going to find out because it has elements of his character. It will explain their past. There's stuff that can connect all of that. So I think some of those comments that I've been seeing online, I want to put that to rest right now, at least on my channel. It could still happen without them having to do a 1 remake or having to do Code Veronica to establish that Chris and Wesker hate each other. Even if you are a casual fan, you are playing Resident Evil 4 Remake, you are seeing his power, you are seeing what Wesker is being, set up as this villain. That's all that needs to be said. There are still original games to go back to understand the story. It's not like you can't go back to those other games. Code Veronica is still readily available to play on platforms. It's not on PC. Yeah, that sucks, but it's still readily available. And look, I think it will get remade eventually, just not right now. But I don't know. I could be wrong too. Code Veronica could be announced as the next remake. I don't know. I don't have the inside scoop. I'm just seeing at the obvious signs that RE4 remake pointed towards. Maybe they gave Code Veronica to another team. Maybe they put it with the same team that did RE4. I don't know. It just seems like the RE4 ending, the remake ending, is leading right into RE5, and that's just what I'm saying. I'm not saying I know. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying that's what I'm observing. That's how I feel. But it could still happen. All these remakes, I think, will happen eventually in due time. But I think we also have to focus on Resident Evil 9 because the main line, at least in my opinion, just didn't really leave off in a very good spot. Even with the Shadows of Rose DLC, I thought that was okay DLC. It wasn't horrible. And I'm happy that it actually finished the Winter story. Like, it just put that book on the shelf. It's done. But we don't need to continue anymore. We don't need Rose. We don't need more. Like, we're done. Let's try to keep this. 7 and 8 can be the Winter stuff. Let's try to move on and try to stay positive. And hopefully us fans get what we want in Resident Evil 9. And hopefully it's not open world. So I'm interjecting here while I'm editing the show. And I completely forgot to talk about Dino Crisis Remake. For some reason, I wrote it down on my notes, but I did not actually talk about it here for some reason. So I wanted to do this little audio thing to kind of interject into the other part of the show. Dino Crisis Remake. We have to talk about it. I know people would have been like, Anthony, what the hell? And Capcom did a survey. I voted on this survey. I'm sure many of you did as well. At the end of the year, it was like the Capcom Star survey. And it was to kind of gauge where the fans were as far as what they like to see, what they want to see. And the highest rated game out of that survey is Dino Crisis. And Dino Crisis has been dormant since Dino Crisis 3, which is not very good at all, but this is a chance for Dino Crisis to come back. 1 and 2 were like the main bread and butter of what people remember, very nostalgic and very, very memorable in my opinion, even though it, kind of fell off. Like I said, by the third game, it kind of, did have an identity crisis, but it was a definite dip in quality and the actual, mechanics of the game were different and they changed up a lot. Now with the first one being completely remade from the ground up, I am all for this. I think this is a project that can easily, like I said, expose to other people that are into the Resident Evil franchise that may have never played Dino Crisis or heard of it, or maybe they heard of it, they just never played it. Those little things, leading up to this, all of the success with survival horror, all of the success with Capcom lately, how they've been on a complete upswing. They climbed out of that hole that they were in 2012, 2013, and now we see them stronger than ever, so they can start making these decisions. They can start bringing back, stuff. I think Onimusha was also on this list, as well as Ace Attorney, which I know is still around and still gets released, but I'm pretty sure they're older versions of the game, if I'm not mistaken. But this is what came out in the report. Those are the 3 games. But Dino Crisis being on top, it's just really cool that they're doing stuff like this that makes the fans happy because it gives them a voice and saying, hey, you know what, bring this back. I know Dead Rising was also on this list. A couple others that were already brought back, like Mega Man was on there. But I guess, the last Mega Man was 2017 or 2018. So I guess it has been a little bit. But, I really was trying to focus on the games that needed to come back that were really gone for a while. And Dino Crisis was just the obvious pick. So I'm pretty sure most of you listening to this or watching this voted on Dino Crisis. Maybe you voted on something else. Let me know down in the comments. But yeah, Dino Crisis Remake, I am all for it. And it's really cool to see the response that they're starting to acknowledge Dino Crisis, which is something they haven't done in years. And Exoprimal doesn't really count because it just was its own thing. And if you like Exoprimal, that's cool. But it's not Dino Crisis. Dino Crisis isn't a multiplayer-based game. It's a single-player-based game. And, hopefully we actually get something in the Rex engine that is, going to probably be on next gen at this point. I don't know if it's going to hit these consoles. It might, depending on how late in the cycle it is or when they decide to do it. Because they got the new Monster Hunter they're working on, probably the new Resident Evil titles like I just mentioned in this podcast talking about RE9. So I think this will happen when the time's right. Whether or not they'll bring back Onimusha, I actually really enjoy that game. So that will be another one that would be a really cool game to see come back and have a modern spin for the first time in a while. So we'll see what happens. But I'm excited for Dino Crisis. thank you for listening to this episode of the show. Thank you for, hearing my, ramblings about, what's up and coming and, what I've been through so far this year with some of the live streams and stuff. Just in general, the first 3 months of this year have been, a little wonky, but I'm here now in April, and we're going to kick off a bunch of stuff. Like I said, we're going to keep the streams coming, keep some more podcast episodes flowing this year, and like I said, more updates for Keeper's Diary very soon. And I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anything else. Just a couple things that I'm working on that you will see shortly, just uploaded on this channel. My film projects on Inocular Productions are kicking off this spring, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be another comedy short on my film channel. And we're just going to keep it rocking and rolling. So you can always smash the like button if you're on YouTube, subscribe on there if you're new. You can always download this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Libsyn for free. And check out LTRE on all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Discord. The merch is also down below in the video comments. There's LTRE.store, so you can check that out for your LTRE merch. And hopefully there's going to be some more interviews coming up on the show and some ideas that I've been chomping at the bit to get done as topics for each episode. Bring back the live action RE film reviews as well as the CGI film reviews. So got a lot of stuff in the pipeline that I want to get to recording, get to doing for 2024. So thank you for your patience with everything else. Thanks for all the love and support, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Take care.